Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Monday, January 29th, 2018. I am Dave Biddle, and I'm very happy to be joined by the Dean of Ohio State football recruiting, Bill Kurelic. Great morning to talk to you, Bill. The Buckeyes, of course, added yet another four-star recruit to their 2018 class, wide receiver Chris Olave from California. Talk about what type of player he is and who the Buckeyes beat out and just what type of get this is for the Buckeyes.
Well, he's a 6'1", 170-pound wide receiver from California. Productive guy, good speed, catches the ball well, and a guy that Ohio State beat out principally UCLA and Utah. You know, those were his other two official visits, but he also had been considering USC. They also had offered him a scholarship, but really in the end it came down to Ohio State, UCLA, and Utah, and the Buckeyes won out. And you know, he's a guy that I don't necessarily see him as a guy that I would depend on his first year, but he's a guy I think that can be a very good wide receiver for Ohio State. You know, it's very rare where somebody comes in as a first-year wide receiver and makes a big impact. That seldom happens. But I think Chris Olave's got a chance to down the road, a year or two after he's in the program, to be a good one for the Buckeyes.
That's great news, and you do a story that I look forward to every year. I think you do it more than maybe once a year, but I always look forward to when you give Kurelic's odds on the remaining prospects in Ohio State's class. I want to go through some of those guys. Now with Olave in the bag, we can talk about some of these other guys. Let's start with Christopher Oats. You put it at about 55% that he would be a Buckeye. Is it basically if he makes the grade, he's going to be a Buckeye? Just give us some insights on the Chris Oats situation.
Well, I think it's a combination of two things, really. The space in the class is tight. There's no question about that. With Olave, there's 24 players in the class of 2018, so space is tight. So Ohio State has to push for Chris Oats, obviously, and a big part of the factor of whether or not or how hard they push certainly is that him taking care of everything for the NCAA clearinghouse, academics, etc. And I think if that was a sure thing, and then Ohio State would certainly be pushing for him. But in the end, I still tend to think that's going to happen. He is getting things taken care of, and again, as long as he does, and as long as Ohio State pushes for him, I think he'll be a Buckeye. But those are the two things to keep in mind.
Yeah, you mentioned space is tight. After adding Olave last night, how many more spaces do they have in your estimation?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on who wants in. For instance, if they, let's say, have a chance to have both Rasheed Walker and Nicholas Petit-Frere in the class, the two outstanding offensive tackles, they're not going to turn those two down. Whether they get to 25 before those two or not, as an example, they're not going to turn those two down. So let's say that they did get to 25 and had a chance to get both of those guys on National Signing Day, then they'll go to 27. But I think realistically, I think 26 to 27, is what we're looking at because as we know, we're at 24 right now, and they would love to get those two tackles. And if they get one of them and then one or two other guys, they're right there at 26 or 27.
Those are the next two guys on my list. Let's talk about those big offensive tackles. Rasheed Walker, as you've mentioned, you pointed out on the show, you pointed out in all your writing on Bucknuts.com that it's really close between Ohio State and Penn State. You look at the crystal ball, it's in Penn State's favor, 69% to 31% for the crystal ball picks. But Bill Kurelic, who is as close to this as anybody, says it's a 50-50 chance. Chances of being a Buckeye, 50%. If I made you lean one way or the other, if you had to give me a 51 to 49, which way do you think he might be leaning, Buckeyes or Nittany Lions?
Well, I guess I'll hedge on that and say whoever gets the last visit, being that he's made his official visits to Ohio State and Penn State already. But this week, the two main men are coming in. Urban Meyer, of course, for Ohio State, and James Franklin for Penn State. They'll make their in-home visits. Now, who gets the last shot. We don't know that right now. I'll go with the leader at 51% or so to whichever coach gets that last shot. We don't know what Urban Meyer can do getting the last shot, so I certainly would not bet against him.
Makes a lot of sense. Whoever gets that last crack at him, with it being as close as it is, and two dynamite recruiters in Urban and James Franklin, makes a lot of sense. As you talk to Rasheed, what is really important to him? I'm sure there's a multitude of factors that are important to him, but is it like early playing time development for the pros, like academics? Like what's kind of the main selling point for both schools for Rasheed Walker?
Well, when I talked to him in San Antonio, at the U.S. Army All-American Bowl, I talked quite a bit with him, obviously, in person, and got to know him a little bit. And I think it really just comes down to where he feels comfortable. And that means everything from comfortable with the players to the coaches to the football program, education. He told me that he's just looking for the best fit where he feels comfortable. And, that he's been on those two visits. Now Urban Meyer and James Franklin are going to try at the last minute here to convince him that, the comfortable place is their school.
Nicholas Petit-Frere, another very highly rated 5-star offensive lineman. He's actually rated higher than Rasheed Walker, with Rasheed Walker, of course, being a high 4-star, Petit-Frere being a 5-star. I've thought for a while he's Florida-bound. You have him 40% chance of being a Buckeye. I would take those odds if I'm Ohio State. Just give us some more thoughts on Nicholas Petit-Frere.
Well, before I do that, I want to go back one more thing on Walker real quick, talking about that comfort factor. He's got a good feel for the schools. He didn't just make official visits to Penn State and Ohio State. He's been to each one of those schools at least 5 times total. So he just wants to feel where, get the comfortable feeling, and the more he visits, the more he does, and we'll see what happens. But now moving on to Petit-Frere, I think he could end up at Florida, certainly, but Alabama is a very realistic possibility for him. And then you've got Notre Dame. Petit-Frere, academics is going to be very important in his decision. And obviously Notre Dame is very highly regarded academically. So I think I would not rule out any of the schools that he's considering. But, right now I think going into his Ohio State visit, you've got to give, because he hasn't made that official to Ohio State yet, you've got to give the edge to Alabama, Florida, and perhaps Notre Dame. But Ohio State gets the last shot with that last official visit this coming weekend. And again, when you have a chance to close, there's not much of anyone better than Urban Meyer. So, also, I should mention Greg Schiano is absolutely huge in this decision. Greg Schiano, time in Tampa with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's familiar with that school. His kids went there. He's going to be instrumental. If the Buckeyes land Petit-Frere, it'll be, as much as anything, there would be no bigger factor than Greg Schiano's input in that decision.
Last young man I want to ask you about, and we'll get you out of here. 3-star corner DJ Brown from Washington, D.C., committed to Virginia, of course, but you look at the crystal ball, they have 100% of the crystal ball picks have him going to Clemson. Doesn't sound like he's going to be a Cavalier, does it? But you give the Buckeyes, though, a 20% chance, which I found interesting. More than a puncher's chance here with DJ Brown. Talk a little bit more about that.
A lot of it's based on, does he actually make it up here for an official visit to Columbus? Last he told me he's considering that visit, and he thought he would take it, but he didn't know for sure. So obviously if they can't get him on campus, they're not going to be able to flip him or get him away from either Virginia or Clemson for that matter. They've got to get on campus. He seemed to think that he would make the visit. We'll see if that actually happens. But again, if they get a kid on campus, they've got a shot. This staff is so good at once they get a kid on campus, and then, of course, Urban as a closer, that it gives them a shot at least.
Great stuff, as always, from the Dean of Ohio State football recruiting, Bill Kurelic. Thank you very much, Bill, and thanks to all the listeners out there for tuning in to the show. I hope you have a great day. Let's hear that Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.